In 1965, you and I met in,
in Lagos.
And we were talking at that time about some of the things that were causing disruption in Nigeria, in Africa as a whole, things falling apart, as you wrote about yourself. Did you have any premonition, any thought that things would fall apart this much at that time?
No, not this much. No, nothing like this. I saw the Nigerian Federation, the possibility of its dissolution, the possibility of serious trouble, but not taking the form which it did take. When I saw the government falling, for instance, because it was hopelessly corrupt. In fact, probably by the time we were talking, the two of us, I was already working on my novel, which was my fourth novel, which handled the situation, the corrupt situation of a government and military intervention when nothing else seemed possible. But I didn't foresee anything like the massacres of eastern Nigerians and the present situation. I think, as far as I'm concerned, the honeymoon is over. The first few years of independence is full of promise, is full of excitement, and actually a lot has happened. I mean, there's nothing like running your own business. I mean, whatever anybody may say. It's better to be in charge of your business and mess it up than get somebody else to do it for you. I strongly believe in this. But at the same time, I think that one has to take a hard look. And I'm now talking as a writer, you see, and my next book is in fact intended to take a hard look at the situation, what we have made of this freedom. And there are some very sad mistakes, some very sad incidents that one must record.
Så på det politiske plan. How did these massacres and the horrible things that happened affect you yourself and your closest family?
Oh, everybody here was affected. Practically everybody here had something that touched him. I lost a few relations. I had to run away from Lagos because it was not safe. Soldiers went to where I worked to look for me. So I still gave the thing 2 weeks to make sure whether it was just a handful of people getting out of hand. But it wasn't. It seemed like a well-planned and coordinated program, so I fled like many other people.
You lost a brother, didn't you?
Yes, in the army in Ibadan, a young fellow. He was killed.
What do you think of the reaction abroad in the outside world to the situation here in Biafra?
Well, to begin with, one was very much disappointed in the early stages at the lack of appreciation of the issues. I mean, one ran into arguments about the importance of federations, that sort of thing. And this I find extremely infuriating, that in the face of what has happened and was happening, that the argument should turn on the virtues of a federation, unity. Now it seems to me to be terribly wrong to put systems of government over the welfare of men. It seems to me that governments are designed to serve and preserve men and society. And here you had a government which not only did not serve or preserve a significant section of its citizenry, but went out of its way to join in their destruction. And still people talk about the virtues of unitary government or unity or federation. I think this is outrageous. Taking Europe as an example, the attitude seems to be, well, this is an African affair. Well, it isn't. This is a human affair. It is all right to give Africa, since this is right at its doorstep, the first option. But it's obviously failed. It's obviously failed to take any meaningful step in this. And it would have appeared to me, I would have thought, that the rest of the world would then see the problem and deal with it as a human problem. We are not only Africans, we are in the world as well. African independence is a myth. You see, there's really very little independence here. When people say, for instance, this is an African problem, let's leave it to them, they are being dishonest. When Britain says, for instance, this is an African problem, or Wilson says this is an African problem, he is being grossly dishonest, because if they thereafter left the matter to Africans, it would be another matter. But they say that in public, and then they go around and supply arms to one side in the conflict. So it's not. In fact, they're not leaving this matter to be solved by Africans, so it doesn't make sense. So the first disappointment one I got is that this independence that about which we rejoiced in the early 1960s is really quite empty. And if only Africans would see it, see that what's happening here, the bell that is tolling here is tolling for them. If they would only see it, I mean, something would have been gained out of this disaster.
Well, you are now living in a completely surrounded, or almost completely surrounded, country. What are your hopes now for Biafra in this situation?
No, my hopes have always been the same. Even when we were not, as you said, completely surrounded. But remember that even from the very beginning we were surrounded, because one of the first acts of Britain was to supply Nigeria with warships to mount a blockade against us. So it's really a matter of degree of this compression. It was there from the beginning. And my hope is that we ought to be left alone. And I wish, this is not too much to ask. I mean, to ask to be left alone. And 14 million people, for God's sake, can say, leave us alone. And that should be enough, whatever the reasons. And this is what I hope will happen, even at this late hour.